Okay. You have ஐயையோ! அதெல்லாம் எனக்கு தேவையில்ல. ETA ஸ்கொயர்ட்னா என்னன்னு சொல்லு. இஸ் எசென்ஷியல் அனோவா ஈக்வலன்ட் ஆஃப் ஆர் ஸ்கொயர்ட் இன் த லீனியர் ரெக்ரெஷன். எனக்கு லீனியர் ரெக்ரெஷனே தெரியாதே. Tells you the bank for a buck-ஆ? என்னடா பேசுறீங்க? Regarding your independent variable. Here is a breakdown of how it works. As you noted, ETA squared calculates the proportion of total variance in the dependent variable that is accounted for by the groups or treatments. SS between SS total. How to interpret the value? Because it represents the proportion. இது என்ன பேர் மறந்துச்சு எனக்கு. Ranges from 0 to 1. Jacob-Cohen's widely accepted guidelines for interpreting magnitude are small, medium, large. Why does it overestimate the variance? Listen, Gemini, I don't know this complexity. I know only Anova basic. தயவு செஞ்சு give me simple explanation. Pi analysis. How much does this specific thing actually matter? Imagine you are running an experiment to see if three different types of diet affect weight loss. You run a basic ANOVA and it tells you yes, there is statistically significant difference between the diets. Great, but ANOVA only tells you the difference exists. It does not tell you how big or important the difference is. This is where ETA squared comes in. Imagine the total variation in everyone's weight loss is giant pie. One slice of the pie is the weight loss caused specifically by the diet. The rest of the pie is the weight loss caused by everything else: gene, sleep, daily steps, or just random difference between people. ETA squared is simply the percentage size of the diet slice. If your ETA squared is 0.14, it means 14% of difference in weight loss was because of the diet. The other 86% was just random individual differences. How to read it? Once you get your ETA squared, which is always between 0 and 1, you can easily judge small effect, medium effect, large effect. Why did the previous text say it overestimates? Imagine you bake a real pie and tiny bit of steam puffs up the crust, making the pie look slightly bigger than it actually is. That is what ETA squared does, because it only looks at the small group of people in your specific study. It tends to accidentally include a little bit of random background noise and count it as part of the diet slice. So it says 14% in real world, it might actually only be 12%. Oh, okay. Okay, got it. Now you can explain the complexity. Let's see if we can, முன்னாடி கொடுத்தது முதல்ல புரியுதான்னு பார்ப்போம். Small, medium, இதெல்லாம் okay. ETA calculates the proportion of total variance in the dependent variable that is accounted by for or by the groups or treatment. Hmm. Not an unbiased estimator for entire population. It overestimates the tour population effect size because, because it doesn't account for degree of freedom. In smaller sample, random noise can easily look like real effect, inflating the SS between because purely looks at the sample data. It bakes that random error might right into the effect size. If you want an unbiased estimation of the population effect size, statistically, statisticians usually turn to omega squared. Wow. It epsilon square, which adjusts for sample size and degree of freedom to give more honest and conservative estimate. They are identical in one way, Anova. This is because there is only one independent variable, so that total variance and the variance not explained by anything else amount to the same context. T squared, eta squared. Still divides by SS total. If you have multiple variables, then square value for each variable will be complete for a piece of mean SS total pi. Partiality. If only divides by the sum of score of the effect plus the error, it is essentially removes the influence of all other independent variables from the denominator, because the denominator for partiality squared is will almost always be larger than the square in multiple factor analysis. Last one எனக்கு புரியல. Fix omega. Omega square will shrink the size of the pi down to more realistic honest size. Partiality in one pi isn't enough. In a basic one-way ANOVA, you are only testing one independent variable, example diet. But what if you do more complex study where you test diet and exercise at the same time? This is a this is called a two-way ANOVA. Now your total pie of weight loss has to be split up differently. This is where two types of ETA squared diverge. Classic, partial. Oh, if diet explain 10% of all weight loss and exercise explain 40%, they each just get their slice of the total pie. The problem, if exercise is a massive slice, it makes the diet slice look tiny and unimportant by comparison, even if diet actually works quite well. ஓ அப்பதான் partial பண்றோமா? solves this by changing the size of the pie for each variable. It asks, if we completely ignore the fact that people exercised, how much did the diet matter out of what was left? Instead of dividing by the total pie, it only divides by the diet slice plus random unexplained leftovers. By removing the exercise slice from math entirely, the denominator gets smaller because you are dividing by smaller number. Partial ETA squared will almost always give you a bigger percentage than classic. Okay, okay. Great for simple study. Tells you percentage of total sample variance explained. Omega, the realistic cousin, adjusts for sample size so it doesn't overestimate. Partial, used in complex studies with multiple variables. It looks at variable impact in an isolated bubble, ignoring the other variables. Okay. Hmm. Two-way analysis of variance. The name suggests two-way analysis examine the influence of two factors on a dependent variable. This extends the one-way analysis of variance by further factor, that is, by a further nominal scaled independent variable. The question is again whether the mean of the group differs significantly. Level of measurement metric to nominal. Semester. Okay. Example, if a screw factory, coffee consumption, okay, between groups, okay, ஐயோ என்ன இப்போ போயின்னு இருக்கு ஐயோ F distribution is essential for determining the statistical significance of your ANOVA results. It is a probability distribution that arises frequently when dealing with variances. F distribution is right skewed and varies based on the degree of freedom for the numerator and denominator. Types of ANOVA, one-way ANOVA calculation, two-way ANOVA calculation, MANOVA, multivariate ANOVA. அனோவாவே மல்டிபிளாக தான் தெரிஞ்சது இல்லை மல்டிவேரியேட் அனோவா என்ன பண்ணும் மல்டிபிள் டிபெண்டன்ட் வேரியபிள்ஸ் simultaneously. This method is useful when you need to understand the effect of independent variables on several outcomes. ANOVA is used when you have more than one independent variable. For example, you might want to study the impact of training program on both employee performance and job satisfaction. While ANOVA examines one dependent variable at a time, ANOVA assesses multiple dependent variable, accounting for their correlation and providing more comprehensive analysis. ANOVA calculation, ANOVA assumption and preconditions, testing for normality. இது என்ன புதுசா? Kolmogorov Smirnov test. Another test for normality comparing the sample distribution with normal. ஏய் இது என்னடா புதுசு புதுசா இன்க்ளூட் பண்றீங்க? ஹோமோஜினிட்டி லெவின்ஸ் டெஸ்ட் மட்டும்தான் எனக்கு தெரியும். பார்ட்லெட் டெஸ்ட், ஹார்ட்லி எஃப் மேக்ஸ் டெஸ்ட். என்னங்கடா நீங்க டார்ச்சர் பண்றீங்க? Independent of observations. Checking assumptions. F statistic. This value indicates the ratio between group variance to within group variance. A higher F value suggests a more significant difference between a group. This value helps P value determine the less than typically indicates the significant differences between groups. Post hoc, if your ANOVA results significant, okay. FXs, consider calculating the FXs to understand the magnitude of the difference, not just their significance. Standard measure include ETA squared and coherence D. Oh my god, effect size. effect sizeக்கு தான் வந்து ETA squaredum cons Dயும். Reporting result, descriptive statistics. Presenting your ANOVA results clearly and accurately is essentially including the following: ANOVA table, F value, degree of freedom, P value, post-hoc test results, interpretation, ANOVA versus other test, T test, அப்புறம் regression analysis நான் படிக்கல, ஆனால் எனக்கு தெரியாது. Chi-squareம் நான் படிக்கல. ANOVA வந்து மல்டிவேரியட் தெரியும். கன்க்ளூஷன் ஃபார் ANOVA சரிதான். இவன் வந்தான் பாருங்க. யப்பா டேய், ஃபேக்டோரியல் அனோவானா என்ன, ரேங்க்டு அனோவானா என்ன, கேம்ஸ் ஹாவல் பேர் வைஸ் டெஸ்ட்னா என்ன, என்னடா சொல்றீங்க? Types, two-way paths. Factorial. This variant of ANOVA is used when there are more than two independent variables. For example, a business might use factorial ANOVA to examine the combined effect of age and income and education level on consumer purchasing effects. Used when there are two independent variables. More than two independent variables. Oh. Most simple testing group used when one independent variable, two independent variable, multiple, more than two independent variable. Welch test na என்னது, equal variance இல்லாதப்ப. Ranked ANOVA used with ordinal data when the assumptions are violated. Okay. This is essentially a t-test but is used when the assumption of homogeneity of variance has been violated, which means different groups have different variances. For example, a company might games hall pairwise test. இதே எத்தனை பேருடா நாமும் வச்சுக்க முடியும்? ரிட்டர்ன் ஆஃப் இன்வெஸ்ட்மெண்ட்டா? ஐயோ, டார்ச்சர் பண்றானுங்களே. இத்தனை பேர் குடுத்தீங்கன்னா நான் மறந்து போயிடுவேன். ரொம்ப ஷார்ட் பீரியட் ஆஃப் டைம் திஸ் இஸ். ரொம்ப ரொம்ப ஷார்ட் பீரியட் ஆஃப் டைம். பசிக்குது. நான் போய் சாப்பிட போறேன். பாய். ஒருத்தர பார்த்துட்டு போயிடுறேன். இல்ல நான் வந்தே கால்குலேஷன் பாக்கு. அதுக்கு முன்னாடி ஒரு 10 கொஸ்டினை போட்டுட்டு போறேன். எங்க அது? பாராமீட்ரு. ஐயோ. Give me 10 questions on Anova. What does the analysis of variance fundamentally compare in order to determine if group means are significantly different? Absolute geometric distance between the highest and lowest group median. The ratio of variance between group means to the variance within the group. In one way ANOVA summary table, how is the total sum of square mathematically measured to the component sum of square into what? If you are running one way ANOVA with k is equal to 3 independent groups of total sample of number n 30, how many within group degree of freedom? Between group, within group. ஐயோ. k minus 1 n minus k இருக்கும். between group within group அப்புறம் total 27. Which of the following describes a situation where ANOVA is required instead of multiple independent sample t-tests? Comparing the performance score of single group of students before and after study. பசிக்குது. Checking comparing the average fuel of 4 different car models. What is the primary consequence of running multiple pairwise t-tests to compare 4 groups instead of performing a single omnibus one-way ANOVA? இந்த ஆம்னி பஸ்ஸை வேற நம்ம மறந்துட்டோம். What is the primary consequence of running multiple pairwise t-tests to compare? The data is automatically converted into ordinal scale. The statistical power increases to an unachieved overall. Type 1 error. How is the mean square value calculated in a ANOVA summary table? By adding the between group variance to the within group error variance. மறந்து போச்சு. By taking square root of the final F statistics. Mean square தானே. By multiplying the group mean by the total standard deviation. By dividing the sum of squares for a source. இதுதான். Next, which of the following is an assumption regarding the variance of groups when running a standard one-way ANOVA? Assumption regarding the variance of group when running standard one-way. Variance of the population from exam brand must be approximately equal. Variance of an ANOVA output shows a p-value of 0.45. Wow. What is the most appropriate conclusion at d alpha is equal to 0.05? Accept the alternative hypothesis with moderate confidence. Fail to reject the null hypothesis. There is not enough evidence to claim a significant difference between the group means. Reject the null hypothesis. At least one group is significantly different. Conclude the calculation mistake occurred because p value cannot exceed the இதுதான் ச்சே கிரேட்டர் தானா வந்துச்சு அப்பனா வந்து can easily be attributed to random sampling error, meaning we cannot conclude. ஆமால that's why is an ANOVA referred to an omnibus statistical test? Because it requires all sample sizes to be completely infinite, because it tests for overall difference among all groups simultaneously without identifying which specific pair of means differ. இதுதான். Done. Skipடா. என்னத்த skip பண்ண? What did I skip, dude? I did not skip it. I answered it. What the fuck? What does a very large calculator? Oh, ஆமா நான் அதை பார்க்கவே இல்லை. Typically indicate about the groups being studied. What does a very large calculator F statistics typically indicate about the groups being studied? Groups are perfectly identical, means the variance within the group is much larger than the variance between the group. Between is much larger than. Okay, next one. The variation between the group means is substantially larger than the random error variance within the group, suggesting a real treatment effect. Ah, ஓ வித்தின் அதிகமா இருக்குன்றாங்களா இங்க இல்ல சாம்பிள் சைஸ் இஸ் டூ ஸ்மால் டு ஓகே 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 கூல் பாய்